Hello, Ken Spriggs here with the final chapter, the finale of my 2001 Discovery build. I'm not going to call it part 13, not because I feel unlucky or anything. It's the finale. So this is the final part. Everything's come together. The base is all completed. I have everything fitted inside, all the lights, all the batteries, everything ready to go. And I went off to Wonderfest. I literally just got back from there in Kentucky. Wonderful time. What a fantastic convention. Highly recommend it. Obviously for next year. But met a lot of great people, talked about models and hung out and just had a great time. So, and I'll show you what my fruits of my labor were as well here soon. So, okay, so let's get to it and we'll go ahead and wrap up this video. Wrap up this build, I mean. All right, thank you. All right, so here is the pod that I'm wiring up for lights, or actually using fiber optics for lights, for the 4 little headlights. And also right there in the center, it lights up with a little red light for Hal. I have it all painted, and I have these sticking through in a little plastic styrene tube that they're sticking through. And focus, come on. And I drilled a hole through this extendable pod that tube fits right through. I had to redo some painting. When I drilled through, the metal got hot and it melted off these little pieces that I had to redo. It also messed up the little disc that was here with the ridges, which I just took off because you're not going to see it anyway underneath the pod when it's glued on. So, all right, so this goes through and it comes out the bottom. Let me show you real quick. All right, so there's a tube coming through the bottom. I need to trim off those fiber optics sticking out so that they're right inside the tube, and then I will put a small SMD on the end of it, glue it in place, and then paint over it. All right. Okay, so I've glued the pod onto the extendable pod platform. Okay, trim down the fiber optics so they're flush at the bottom. So the last thing I need to do is just glue an SMD onto there, mask over it with some black, and then figure out how to run the wiring along this this tubing here. I want to come up with some idea where I cover the tops of these with almost like a U-beam, an I-beam, I'm sorry, an I-beam kind of a look. It kind of looks that way in the film. It's hard to see them, but they have some detail to them, so we'll see. And then I'm going to wire it together with a, let me find that here, section of wiring. Here you go. That comes in 2 parts. And then the 2 middle pieces there, one has 2 pins and the other is a receptacle, so they can click together. And they hold together snugly. And I'll trim these way down as well, so that if I want to remove this from the kit, I can disconnect the wiring and just tuck it inside the pod door until I want to reconnect it. And then once I connect the 2, I'll have the part of the wiring attached to this, so it won't be visible, and then the rest will be tucked down as well. So, okay. All right, so I'm doing some last minute modification to the extended pod. The main reason for that is that because I adapted the doors and took the rings off and put them separately, that diameter and radius of the opening is considerably smaller. So the pod platform cannot be left inside and pulled out. It has to be just left out and put in when I want to display it. So also, when the pod was in there, it was sitting pretty high, and it was pretty obvious that it was not going to go back in that door and that it wasn't in the right position. So I wasn't real thrilled with that. So I mulled it over a bit and figured out that there's a pretty simple fix for that. So all I did was, because these little square rod are glued on the bottom, it raises it up. So I just took a pole saw and cut them off close to the end and left a little bit on there, about 1/2 inch. Scraped the paint off of it, and then I sanded smooth the ends, and then took the the parts that I cut off and sanded those smooth as well. So what I'm going to do now, sorry, is I'm going to take these and I'm going to glue them on top of this piece so that it's closer up to the back of this platform. Basically lowering the pod and the platform so that the rods are pretty much coming out of the back of it rather than underneath it, which is what raises it up to be so high. So once I get those glued on, they should be back in the same position, and I'll put them into the kit so I make sure that they line up while doing that. And then once they're dry, it'll do the same thing it was supposed to do, except the pod's going to be lower by the thickness of this rod, which is a considerable amount for this tiny little pod here. So all right, let me do that and then we'll see how that's going to work out. There we go. So that actually looks like it can go back into that pod door and that it extended from it. It's low enough where it should be. And you can see now that the bars are higher up onto the platform, and it wasn't that difficult to modify. I just had to cut them off and not actually find some way to attach them on the back, which would have been more difficult. So let that dry a bit. I can get those painted and figure out how I'm going to get those covered up, and then in the end that's a much lower look. Let me get and put the battery on it and show you how that's going to look lit up. All right, there you go. And ignore that light on the bottom. That's going to be masked over, painted over black, but I have the 4 headlights on it. I have a little red how in the middle there, as you can see. Okay. And there's the wire. The wiring, like I said, is going to be going down inside of it, so you won't see that either. So, okay. All right, so this is all ready to go. Just a little bit of modifications, and this one's ready to get into the kit. So I've started working on a plan to be able to glue the pod bay into the kit, because there's not a lot of room in there once this is in there, and once I get the lab wall on and the maintenance compartment, it's going to be really hard to see and get down inside and get it glued into place. So what I've done is I've initially glued on some styrene stripping down there in the bottom, over there on the left side and on the right there, in order to position it where it's supposed to be. And I'm going to put 2 more pieces along this line on either side, so it's just a nice little grooved in section that the fiber optic pod bay can fit into. Let me put that in there and I'll kind of show you how that's going to be positioned with those guides there. Alright, so getting a little tongue-tied there. I'm working on these guides for the photo etch, not the fiber optics, to fit inside this kit. So I did a little more building of it so that I don't really have to glue the photo etch pod bay into the kit. I can just slide it right down into these guides here. So I put a little build-up section at the bottom, as you can see, and also at the top, and then 2 more flat ones at the bottom. There we go. So the sides and the back of the photo etch go straight down and just marry up right with these, and it's in the perfect position. So I don't really need to glue it in place. So if for some reason I need to take it back out and work on it, or work on some of the wiring, it's not permanently glued into the kit. But it's heavy enough, it's going to stay in there, and these guides hold it right into place. It isn't going to fall backwards or anything. So let me put it in and show you how that's going to look. All right, there we go. So it's hard to see down in there, but you can see the back of it is down right into that flat part at the bottom. The side is right there, and also over here. Sorry about the wiring there. Right there, so they both are holding that in place. So it's not going anywhere. It's sitting in the right position. So once I get the outside of this painted, I can go ahead and just pop this right in. I'm going to finish up the extra parts of it, as far as getting the other sections on the lab wall. I already have the red oxygen tanks there, as you can see. I need to put the larger ones there. and then the maintenance corridor, which I'm working on the lighting on, and we'll get that in as well. Okay. All right, so I've shortened the wires for the lighting on top of the pod bay. I've glued the little light boxes in place over top of it, and on top of the photo etch there's a piece of clear styrene that I frosted by sanding it, and so I just glued these on with standard glue. The piece of plastic is glued on with CA glue. Alright, so I'm letting those dry a bit, then I'm going to take some 5-minute epoxy, stick it all around them to really secure those in place so they don't pop off of there. Alright, but here we go. That looks fantastic. A fresh new battery, so it's nice and bright. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to let those dry a bit, put them on a little bit further. Like I said, that I'm going to start focusing on gluing on the other pieces, like the lab wall, the back pieces, and then I'm still working on the maintenance corridor. Okay, so the last thing I have to work on for lighting is this little corridor, the maintenance corridor with a little Dave Bowman figure inside. And I'm only wanting to light up those little clear sections around it. That's the only part. So I took some thin styrene strip and I cut out little pieces like this that were cut off at an angle. They weren't perfect because this isn't a perfect 8-sided figure, but I glued each piece down, as you can see, made a little channel in the middle, and they're just glued right outside the light parts, and I black coated the center ring so it wouldn't shine through there, just through the light parts. Alright, so what I'm working on now is I have a set of 4 of these warm white mega LEDs, all wired into one container, one strip, and I'm going to go ahead and put those around the 4 edges, top, bottom, and 2 sides. So I cut out a piece of light resistant styrene, and I started squaring out a piece. So I'll glue one of those in there, and then start sticking those on the side. All right. All right, so I glued the large SMDs onto these piece of styrene with the black on one side and the white on the other. And I started gluing them down onto the ends. You can see that right there inside. And once done, I can light block it. But these are going to go on the top, bottom, and the 2 sides. So let me get those on, then we'll see how that looks. Okay, there you go. So I still have to close in those open gaps there with some the same thing with some of the black styrene with the white on the inside to make the light brighter. But there you go. You can see that lights up those little rings inside and lights up the whole thing. And it gives a kind of a yellowish glow, which is different than the white glow of the pod bay. And that's what I wanted to go with. That's why I went with the warm white instead of the cool white LEDs for this. So, okay, fantastic. All right, let me get that the rest of that done, and then we'll put it inside the kit and see what it looks like. All right, and here are all of the side panels on around it. And I may or may not paint over those light leaks there and on the sides. We'll see. It might keep the light in more, but it's fairly well evenly lit inside. That yellow glow. Okay, so that's all ready to go. Let me put that inside and see how that's going to look inside the kit. Alright, so I finished the 2 halves of my base that I can take apart, and each of these is 2 feet long, and it's about 9 inches deep, 8 inches high. Well, 9 inches high because it's sitting on top of this. So, and then what I did is I just did a really simple method to be able to connect the 2 together. Initially, I started putting some holes in, and I was going to glue these in and have tubes inside of them, and I thought that's just a waste of time, because when I initially pushed this larger plastic tube into it, it just makes this little circle and it keeps the solid piece inside of it. So that actually is more solid, and I don't even have it glued in at this point. So that they can just go ahead and slide together, and I have 5 different points here. 2 up here in the bottom and then 1 in the corner, so that they fit together, so the whole thing can go together. And they'll be separatable even when I put on the space background, so I can have that in 2 sections as well. And then on this one, this center one here, I overlapped a little bit, as you can see, halfway. So it's glued on this piece, but it's not glued on the other one, but it fits inside of here. So let me get those 2 together and I'll show you how that's going to look. Alright, so there we go. So they're both halves put together. And the whole thing, like I said, is 4 feet long. And I've already drawn out the circles for where I'm going to put the stands to support the ship. So there's the propulsion unit, there's the center, and there's the command module. And I had to carve out a little bit of that so that would fit in there, but it's fine because this will come straight up. And then the rubber posts will simply come up through the curved space picture, and they'll be painted black, so they'll blend in. Alright, so this part's all completed. I'm finishing the final printing of the space scene that I want to use, and then once I get that, I'm going to start working on getting that all together on here. I'm going to sand a little bit more of this front edge, and I'm still debating on how I'm going to get that covered, because this whole part's going to have just some black poster paper, like the thicker poster paper. Excuse me. What I might do is make it long enough so that I can bend a lip that goes over this and over this, so that the top and the bottom are covered. And then what I'll do is I'll have it on the ends as well. I'll make a piece that molds to the end, and then either keep them just that black or paint it like a satin black or something like that. So pretty much the whole thing's just going to be black with the curved space inside of it. And then the ship is going to sit on top of the stand and sit right in this curve right here. Alright, so that's all ready to go. It's all glued together. Turned out really nice. Okay, so let's keep working on this a bit as well. Alright, so I am now working on finishing up my base, and I have the 2 halves as I showed earlier, and I'm starting to put on it's a regular black poster board. I just cut out a section for the side and put it on there. This won't be the final part that's on there, but it's a base, and then I'll be putting the space background over top of it when I'm done. And so I'm getting those cut out and put on there, and all I'm using for this is basically, it's called liquid nails, or well, it's similar. Yeah, it is liquid nails, I'm sorry. It's an all-purpose type of adhesive used for gluing this kind of foam actually into your home and that kind of thing for insulation. So, but it works well, and it's nice and solid, and the base remains nice and light throughout the process. I've also glued in the little platforms. You can barely see it in there, and there's the hole for the rod to come out. And I have the other 2 on the back half, and I measured them off so that they're going to have the Discovery positioned the way I want it to be. So, all right. So let me go ahead and start gluing down the paper, and then we'll start working on the space scene as well. Okay. All right. And here are the 2 halves of the base, and I have the just some black poster paper glued on. I already put a hole in the front for the front sphere post to come up, and it's a little bumpy and rough on some of the parts, but this isn't going to be the final finish. But I let this one dry overnight, and this one's ready to go. The second one back there I have drying for the moment, and it's nice and solid. Gives me a nice solid base to work with. And I use sort of the some of the liquid nails is almost like a putty to putty the edges down and smooth it out. So, but once again, that's going to be sanded and then made covered with other things. All right, so let me kind of show you with a piece of the space background what this is going to look like once I get that in there. All right, there you go. So I'm just holding that in place right now, and it's just going to be glued down onto this curved surface. I'm just going to use some Elmer's spray adhesive for this because this is sort of like a vinyl actually that's printed on. It just has like a smooth plastic finish on the back, which this should stick just fine to this in the paper. And then this will cover up any of the bumps that you're going to see. You're not going to see those when this is on there. And of course this isn't the right piece for this end. I'm going to have Jupiter and its moons and that sort of thing. But all right, it's going to look pretty sweet. It looks like it's going to overhang on the top a bit, hopefully enough so I can just fold it down over the top edge. And then for the front edge, I'm just going to come up with something else, maybe some kind of smooth plastic strip to put along there, or some kind of vinyl or something. So, all right. So let's go ahead and get working on this, and we'll get this attached as well. Okay, so I'm finalizing the pod that's going to be outside of the ship, facing it off, with a little Frank Poole figure in it. And so I came up with a little bottom for it. I just cut out a piece of styrene, cut a hole in it that it would accommodate the tube and the fiber optic sticking through a little bit, painted it white. So I'll be able to take this off and put it back on. And then the tube is just a piece of styrene tube, plastic tube that I painted black. Get that to focus. There we go. And it's white on the inside, and it has an SMD glued on the bottom of it. There we go. Okay, with the wire sticking down. So what I'm going to do then, plastic tube is a little too flimsy, so I'm going to be using some, hold on a second, let me find that. Where are you? Here we go. Some aluminum tube. It's not quite the right diameter, but it's fine. So the wire will go inside of this, and I'll just use some 5-minute epoxy to glue this piece of plastic tube onto the top of it with the wire going through it. And then I'm going to bend it at a 90-degree angle. It's going to go down into the base and come out the back of the base or underneath it. And then it'll just, I may not even have to bend it. It'll just come out the bottom, the wire will come out, and it'll go off to a single coin battery holder with a switch, which I'll have in the back, so I can just turn that on and off. So the aluminum tube is going to be permanently attached to the base. This will be attached to the tube, and then this will come off, and I can just stick it right on top. And then the tube just goes right into that hole over top of the fiber optics. All right. And of course I broke off the arms. One broke off and I fixed it, and then the other broke, and then this one broke again. I'm like, you know what, leave them off for now until I get it all ready to go. They're just too flimsy. Those arms are super flimsy because they're 3D printed. So not a lot of strength to them. I was kind of debating about whether or not I wanted to use the photo etch arms that came with the Red Planet ones. I may still consider that, since they're obviously more sturdy. So I'll probably play with those a bit and see if I like them or if they're going to work for that purpose, and then we'll see. All right, so getting ready to get this put into the base, and it's all coming together here. All right. All right, so I'm ready to go ahead and put everything together and get this all wrapped up. I had to rush through a few things since I'm coming down to the wire here for Wonderfest here. So let me just go over a few things which I did not show. As far as the final color of the ship, I took a whole bottle of Tamiya white, and I just put a little bit of gray into it. I started off by trying to take some gray and lighten it, and that's not a great idea. It just will not lighten. So I backtracked a bit, and a whole bottle of white, just a little bit of gray in it. It's just some light gray actually, and it came out a really, really light gray, and mixed it over the whole kit, and it turned out really well, which I'll show you here in a minute. I also finished up my base, and for the bottom edge and the top edge, I used a just a piece of wood stripping that's 1 inch wide, which was the width of that, and painted it flat black and then glued it on. And then I also used some stick-on letterings that I picked up at Hobby Lobby to put on some names, and I'll show you here. All right, so let's take a look at the final kit, and it turned out fantastically. Thank you. All right, and here is the completed command module. There's the cockpit. And it wants to show it a lot brighter than it really is. There's the extended pod with its headlights on. Little teeny red HAL in the center. You can see right back there, there's the lab wall with the little screens in it. Pretty sweet. Let me get closer. There we go. Oops, sorry. There's that corridor lit up back there. It has that kind of yellowish hue to it, which is really sweet. You can just make out Dave Bowman right there, peeking around. Yeah, you can kind of see him right there too if you look over the top of the pod. All right. So fantastic. This has been a really great build. And I left that other pod out of there on the inside so you can get a better look at the pod bay, which is what I really wanted. So, okay. All right, let me get this onto the kit and we'll show you the final product. All right. All right, and here is my completed 2001 A Space Odyssey Discovery XD1. I have to stay far away from it so you can see the whole thing in frame, but I'll get closer and I'll get some close-ups of it. So first of all, here's my base, and I have some stick-on letters where I have 2001 A Space Odyssey Discovery XD1, and they're on the two halves of the display. They come apart into two pieces. All right, and the kit just sits right there in the middle of it, looking pretty awesome. All right, so let's go take a quick look around the back, and then we'll just look at the whole thing. Actually, there's a front shot of it. The back is just painted black. Okay, and there's the engines. And a shot from behind it. So you have the shot where they're, see if I can replicate it. They're coming in this way, and then you're like, oh, it's bigger, it's bigger. What's happening? And I think they are the first to do this long before Star Wars came out, about 9 years later, and showed us the large reveal of the spaceship from behind. So, all right. So let's take a look at the front of it. And there we go. And the camera is going to make it look a lot brighter, but the cockpit looks beautiful, and so does the pod bay. It's just the right brightness. I have the little mini pod, one of the pods on the outside, with a little Frank Poole figure, and its claws, and it's got its headlights on, as you can see. Oops, sorry. Try to get close. Okay, well, I really can't get that close because it just does not want to focus. All right, there we go. I have the other pod coming out of the pod bay, extended, and it's got its headlights on as well. It's kind of hard to see because once again it washes it out a bit. Then I have the cockpit, or the pod bay. Okay. All right, and I already showed some close-ups of that, but that's the whole kit right there. Looking quite beautiful. And I just brought it back from Wonderfest, so let me show you here what I won there. All right, one other thing I did not show you is that I have a little teeny sensor right here that's blended in. It's remote control. That's what turns on all the interior lights. The lights to the little pod is a switch on the back of the kit, back of the base for that. So I can turn that on automatically. So, all right, so my first entries into Wonderfest, I landed a silver award. Very beautiful. Hold that up to the light, there we go. Wonderfest Hobby Expo. Excellent. Which is the second highest award that you can win, obviously, right below the gold. So very proud of that. Lots of thanks to the Wonderfest judges on picking me for a silver. I really appreciate it. And so this build is going to come to a close. Give you one last shot of that. So thanks again to all my wonderful subscribers, and I met a few down at Wonderfest. It was great talking to you, each and every one of you. Certainly love to talk again and share our modeling ideas. So, all right, well, thanks to everybody, and I will see you for my next build. All right, thank you.